pretty much every profession has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but the one that seems to generate the most discussion is that of teaching. In the spring-summer 2021 edition of Healing Magazine, we asked Kristin Jacoby, a high school English teacher, for her perspective on what the pandemic restrictions meant as she sought to connect with her students amid the crisis. And we're pleased to have her with us here. Hello, Kristin.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You begin your article in Healing Magazine with a point about student engagement, how it's viewed as key to success for a teacher to engage your students, and yet that engagement becomes harder and harder to achieve as time goes on. Was that insight something that you gained as a result of the pandemic?
Actually, no. In pieces, yes, but truthfully, my first insight to that happened at the onset of smartphones. That's when we really started to see a dip in our student engagement, and particularly with social media apps. Our students much prefer to absorb themselves in their phones and their apps rather than in learning. But one thing I did notice over the course of the pandemic, it really did make it harder to engage students because they already had this retreating tendency going on with their technology. And then to put forth a model where some students were not face-to-face with teachers at all, it just made it that much harder to try to get students to engage. Honestly, even in the classroom environment, the masks really did play a part in engagement as well. A lot of my students sometimes were just silent, which in a high school classroom is highly unusual. Sometimes it was nice. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it was like, what a nice break. But other times when you're trying to have discussions, you can only see from the eyes up. And that really makes a change in engagement. You maybe wouldn't think that it does, but that's what I noticed from the pandemic and engagement is the masks and the continued retreating into their devices and their social media.
Now, your article is titled "The If Factor." What does that mean?
So for me personally, I'm a big supporter of the idea of if. I don't put a lot of stock into certainty or guarantees. And I've found that has really carried over into my experiences, both as a teacher and the time in which I was actually doing counseling as a therapist as well. In the classroom, it comes down to a matter of if students are engaged, you're going to see better production, you're going to see better growth, you're going to see better relationships being developed. In therapy, it's similar as well. If there's engagement from the client with the therapist, and if there is a desire to heal and move forward, then that yields better results. And I think for me, when I think about the if factor, it's almost like the perfect storm. If everything is lined up the way it needs to be lined up, then you will see the kinds of results that you're wanting to see. And when it comes down to teaching in a pandemic, if the students are willing to engage and willing to put forth effort, then you're going to see positive results. And if not, you're not.
And part of that is that you note that when you're in hybrid instruction, this is teaching remotely, you had to, and your phrase was bottle your classroom environment for your students to feel as comfortable engaging in that model as they do when they're in school in person physically. What did you have to do to accomplish that?
For me, my classroom environment is really interesting because I am myself. I have lost the ability to be fake over the years. So, my sarcasm and the way that I interact with kids, joking around with them, that is something that I sort of basically had to bottle up and try to share with the students that I was dealing with only online, as well as help the students remember when they were online, but I was also seeing them in person. It gets very complicated, that environment was still there. That environment I found is a lot harder to create over a computer screen. But on the flip side, it was also harder to create in the classroom because of masks. When only half of my face is seen, you can't see my entire facial expression. And that was something I had to become very quickly cognizant of when interacting with students, because in my sarcasm, I'm banking on them seeing my entire facial expression. But if they can't see my entire face, then that could be problematic. So for me, I really tried to transfer the strong in-person relationships and had them carry over into the virtual environment. And another thing that I really, as far as kind of moving through that classroom environment, is I learned that I had to be respectful of students who wanted to stay in the background, for lack of a better explanation. There is no forcing relationships when you're only seeing blank squares on a screen. And at a certain point, I just had to accept that and incorporate that into how I interacted with those students, which was very challenging for me.
It's so interesting you say that, because I think about how we learn very quickly in the digital age that nuance is lost when you're talking about social media posts or emails. And you might say something and in your mind, you're saying it, but you're saying it with tonal inflection and the facial expressions and everything else. And, they're not getting that. To your point,
No.
There's something blocking that. Either the technology might be the remote or even just the mask. So I think these insights you have are so valuable to make people understand what you've gone through and what the kids may have gone through as a kid. So let me ask you to look a little bit farther ahead. Keep our fingers crossed. We're at the point where we're going to start moving past the protocols about the pandemic. We can maybe put the masks in the rear view. We can hopefully. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think there are ways that the pandemic has changed the model of teaching going forward, even after it's pretty much taken care of?
I can really only say that I hope so. I've been feeling this way for years. I think systemically, education is really ready for an overhaul. And many of the overhauls that we've gotten in the last, I've been in it for 15 years, so I can only say the last 15 years has been forcing more technology into the classroom. And I'm at a point now where I would like to see technology be thrown out the window. I'm so tired of doing everything on a computer. I'm so tired of standing in front of a group of 7 or 8 kids and their heads are in their computers, because that was the easiest way, so to speak, to handle everything. So as far as, where I see education going, I hope it changes. I feel that education changes tend to be slow for some reason. And I think that there just needs to be more focus on the students themselves and not necessarily what they quote unquote need to learn. I think more focus on the person as opposed to the process or the system would be a really good flip to see. And I feel it coming. I see it specifically in Liberty and some of the things that we've been doing in my school in the last couple of years. But how that translates into education in general, I don't know. But I think it would really be kind of criminal if we as educators didn't take this opportunity and learn from it and make significant changes moving forward.
We ask each of our guests on the podcast for a life hack. This could be a favorite saying, a piece of advice, maybe something that you do that gets you through a bad day. Do you have a life hack for us?
My life hack, honestly, is go to therapy. That's my biggest life hack. I'm a big proponent in at some point everyone needs to go to therapy in their lives. But for me personally, what I tend to tell myself when I'm dealing with something that I don't want to deal with, I just repeatedly say, keep moving forward. I think sometimes the worst thing we can do is move backwards. So for me, it's just that mentality of keep moving forward, take a breath, move forward. And the other thing, actually, someone told me recently when I was having a difficult moment was the idea that this is just a blip. So if you are having a challenging moment or something is really frustrating you, pressing you and taxing you emotionally, just try to take a step back and remember this is just a blip. This is not forever. It's just a blip. And hopefully that can help you keep moving forward.
That's excellent advice, and I think everybody should definitely adopt that going in trying to figure out what happens after the pandemic. Just say this will pass.
Yep.
We'll move on. There'll be something else, as you say. Keep moving forward.
Yes.
Kristin Jacoby teaches high school English in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and is preparing to publish her third novel in early 2022. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Her article, The If Factor, is in the latest issue of Healing Magazine. Kristin, thanks again for joining us, and thank you so much for that wonderful article.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity.